In this podcast, we're exploring Mary Baker Eddy's favorite text, the First Commandment. Okay, right after God declares, "I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery," God says, "You shall have no other gods before me." In other words, I'm the God who freed you, so don't go around worshiping other gods, because what they offer as freedom always turns out to be slavery. Have you ever asked yourself, what am I relying on to make friends, be happy, pass my classes, do well in sports? The First Commandment urges us not to put something in place of God that isn't up for the job, because if we do, we're setting ourselves up for disappointment. As Mary Baker Eddy writes in Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures, divine mind rightly demands man's entire obedience, affection, and strength. No reservation is made for any lesser loyalty. Unlike most of the commandments which begin, "You shall not," the Hebrew text at the start of the First Commandment actually says, "There will not be to you other gods." So some scholars have interpreted the First Commandment as a declaration of a fact to be celebrated, rather than as a command to be obeyed. Placing this declaration as the First Commandment shows how important it is. So it's no surprise that Jesus quotes the positive form of this commandment as found in Deuteronomy 6, when he's asked what the greatest commandment is. He says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your might." This text, which Jews pray every morning and evening, is described by Mary Baker Eddy as the El Dorado of Christianity. According to tradition, there were two great Jewish rabbis the century before Jesus, Rabbi Hillel and Rabbi Shammai. Shammai was very harsh and literal in his interpretation of Torah, while Hillel was described by those who knew him as one of the most loving people they'd met. A Gentile told Rabbi Shammai that if Shammai could explain all 613 biblical laws while standing on one foot, then he'd convert to Judaism. Shammai was not amused. He picked up a stick and chased after that Gentile. So the Gentile went to Rabbi Hillel and posed the same question. Rabbi Hillel stood on one foot and said, "Love God, and what is hateful to you, don't do to your neighbor. This is the whole Torah. All the rest is just commentary." So when Jesus is given the same question a century later, he responds in a similar way, by quoting the positive form of the First Commandment, as found in Deuteronomy 6, and by quoting Leviticus 19, "Love your neighbor as yourself." These two commandments are a great summary of the 10 Commandments, which are introduced with the declaration, "I am the Lord your God," and end with the word, "your neighbor." The first few commandments appear to talk only about loving God, and the rest of the commandments only about loving our neighbor. But by joining these commandments together, the 10 Commandments teach us that these two types of love and relationship are connected. Our relationships with each other are grounded in our relationship with God. We can't truly love our neighbor until we see our neighbor as a child of the God who is love. So the commandments begin with God. The Bible resources that I quoted in this podcast are listed on the Sunday School section of the tmcyouth.com website.
This podcast is produced and copyrighted by the First Church of Christ Scientists in Boston.